Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the open lecture. We have the guest from Greece today, Professor Alcestis Rodi from the University of Patras. Alcestis is collaborating with our university, with Faculty of Architecture, and we know each other very well because we've been working on the project Erasmus Plus SUSPA Sustainable Urban Pavilion. So during these activities, we just discovered that the future collaboration will bring many positive results, and that's why Professor is visiting us regularly, and we are very happy to host her. Please, Alcestis, tell about your work and about your activities.
First of all, it's my pleasure to be here today. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for coming here. You must love architecture very much to go out with such conditions. In Greece, everything will be closed, all the universities and the schools. I'm a professor of urban design and planning, and my focus is on adjectival urbanism, meaning smart city, resilient cities, plus universal design. My research is recently also on accessibility. And today we're going to talk about the new and old in architecture. In these three aspects of this, which is enthesis, parathesis, and antithesis. Should we start the...
Yes,
okay.
Yes. We are thrilled to listen.
And please feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions or you don't understand something from what I'm presenting. We're going, of course, to present some strategies that are going to help you in design, meaning if you have a historic or sensitive environment, how you can insert new architecture in this environment. And starting from the title of the presentation, we have two words, which is the old versus the new. The old means conservation or continuity, that it's a built environment that we want to preserve. It's about basically about our cultural heritage, architectural heritage. And the new has to do with, of course, with development and change. And the other three words that are coming from the Greek vocabulary, enthesis is interposition of the new with the old, parathesis is the juxtaposition, and antithesis is the counterposition. Usually we like a lot the ruins. I mean, we find some kind of charm. This charm existed even from the 17th century. You can see here on this image, on this painting by Hubert Robert, that he represents the Grand Gallery of Louvre in ruins. Even of the gallery was itself perfect, but he liked this kind of approach, imagining the gallery in ruins. And also, the pastry chef of Napoleon, he was going to the National Library and watching, he was finding books of architecture, and then he was making pastry that they were resembling of this kind of ruins. In these images, you can see the sketches for this pastry. But the nostalgia for the old contains also at the same time the modernity of the coming future. And why I'm saying that? For example, you are familiar with this iconographia of Piranesi, of Campo Marci, which actually in this map, Piranesi presents the ruined remains of ancient Rome. What you see here actually are the ruins, but what he did, they are not the later buildings. They are not the buildings, the contemporary to Piranesi. So you can see the landscape just with the ruins. So with this mapping, actually he does not depict the existing city, neither nor the ancient one. And what Aureli says is that in a single illustration, Piranesi summarizes these three seemingly contradictory actions. Demolition, because he demolishes whatever is new, whatever is contemporary to his era. Rehabilitation, meaning that we are using the ancient ruins to rehabilitate them, to restore them, and be functional. And then reconstruction. And the reconstruction is the new. And it takes place in space in between the ruins. And of course, Piranesi's approach can be seen as prophetic of what was to come. 2 years before he died, the perfecting of the steam engine will trigger a growth. We have the Industrial Revolution, so the industry itself threatened the cultural heritage, as you can see here on the image. So what is important or historic or something that has a value that we want to keep? For example, you can see here the difference between the Western and the Eastern civilization. You can see two emblematic buildings at the left in Japan, the shrine, which was built in the 3rd century AC, and then the Parthenon in Greece, Acropolis, the 5th century BC. As you can see here, the one at the left keeps the same form and the same function without keeping the original materials. The materials are made from wood, and they actually reconstructed every 20 years. The wood is coming from a sacred forest, and then they have to rebuild the shrine. While on the other hand, you can see Parthenon, which actually there is no any use of it. I mean, it does not it does not have the original function, but it has also it has the original material, which is the marble. Does the stone simply give an illusion of permanence, a false sense of continuity, a deceptive assurance of life? Which is more important, the left or the right building? So the juxtaposition of new and old, either to highlight the contrasts or similarities, creates meaning. And why I'm saying this? Because staying in Acropolis, what you saw before, at the beginning of during the establishment of the new Greek state, which was at the beginning of the 19th century, there was a question where to locate the palace. And you can see from Singel here, his proposal to make the royal palace, to insert the royal palace on the Acropolis. Here, of course, is the Parthenon. Okay. This, you can see also the amazing drawings, very nice also elevations. And you can see that here he even inserts a hippodrome. But this, in our days, will sound a little blasphemous, meaning that, of course, we could not do something like that today. But then, the plan is renowned as one of the great utopian schemes in the history of architectural design. And leaving aside the almost blasphemous notion of introducing such a massive complex, what Singel did, for the first time, there is an effort to be in a dialogue with our historic environment. And he did that in very masterfully, actually, because he well adapted to both the site and the local climate. He was a Prussian architect, you may already know him. So let's now see what Kohlhaas in the Venice Biennale of 2010, how he approaches the protection of ancient monuments. So here you can see that in 1882, we have the protection of ancient monuments that are till the 400 BC. Okay, so we only protect these monuments with this Protection Act. Then in 1913, we move the monuments that, the age of the monuments that we protect to the Roman, British, and medieval monuments. So we include also the medieval monuments. Then, with another act in 1983, establishes actually the 30 years rule. What does this mean? That everything that is older than 30 years, we can consider it, or we can think if we want to enlist it, okay, in our heritage. And then in 2007, we put no age of the building. It can be built yesterday, still we can actually list it as a protected monument. No likely periods of interest. And this is actually somehow strange because as you can see, the list of buildings and sites to be protected are constantly being bigger and bigger and bigger, the World Heritage list. So a lot of people wonder or they are worried both about the criteria for inclusion as well as its extent. For example, Kohlhaas claims that the areas that we protect actually reaches to 12% of the planet. Of course, he includes the natural areas and everything. And he was very concerned when his own building, which is this house you may know in Bordeaux, that was designed for a person with disabilities, when his own building, after 3 years of its completion, there was a need to rearrange the layout because the owner died and his daughter wanted actually to rearrange the space. And the Ministry of Civilization in France would not allow him. And are you aware of this building? Okay, so why we are thinking that it is so important? Because it goes beyond assuming that disability is only about accessibility. Here, the owner is treated as the central design generator. This platform, wherever it stops, it can fill the gap in the space, and the space can be functional. And then he put another question: what is the perspective? Can actually ensure that we can we can enlist a building for protection even before it is physically manifested? Meaning that even if I have designed a building or a site, can it be listed? It sounds strange, correct? But think of this example. Louis Kahn in New York, that actually 4 decades after his death, they built this site, okay? And Kohlhaas proposes to replace, he makes a comment, Kohlhaas and AMO, his Office of Research, he makes this Parathesis of the world culture, the protection of the world heritage is at the left by UNESCO, and then at the right is his own manifesto that highlighted, you can see the words that he has changed. For example, instead of the protection of the world's cultural and natural heritage, he proposes the demolition of world cultural junk. Okay. I'm not going to go more in details about the acts, the regulations for the protection of cultural architectural heritage. There are all these actually since the last 150 years. There are all these regulations that are emerging about the protection. I'm just going to highlight some of them that we are interested in as architects. And of course you can see, you may know that from other classes, John Ruskin was representing the authentic, and Violelle Dick the restored. So we had a conflict. The futurist Marinetti called Venetians the slaves of the past. Okay, these are very milestones, the important books of them or the works that they did with which they had this kind of philosophy. Geats argued that the beauty in the city is defenseless against the smog and the noise of industry. Le Corbusier, of course, with the Athens Charter, where urban development and urban heritage will come to definitive rupture with the Plan Voisin 1925. You remember the Plan Voisin that was about Paris, that it was demolishing a lot of arrondissements, a lot of neighborhoods to make this futuristic project, almost utopian. And then we have, of course, Paolo Portoghesi, the first Biennale in Venice, 1980s. Look please at the title, The Presence of the Past. So we are actually, at that point, we are starting to recognize again the importance of our heritage, the memory, and all these things that the modern movement or the modernists have actually turned their back to. And what he did in this Biennale, he invited 20 architects to participate in a project and an ensemble of facades. So each architect, he was going to actually create something like a facade, an architectural portrait of a building, and these facades will shape the strata novissima. And the interesting thing is that one of them was Rem Koolhaas, that he was against, in his interview a lot of years later, said that I'm not believing in facades. And actually what he did was a curtain that you could open and see inside his approach on the cultural heritage. And 30 years later, he had the opportunity to be the curator of his own Biennale, which is the preservation and chronochaos. He presented what I showed you before. I have just gathered all the shifts in the concepts of protection in the cultural heritage. And as you can see, we are moving from historic values like the Parthenon to cultural anthropological values. For example, a very important person stayed in this house, so we we enlist this house, although it's not architecturally important. Then we are moving from monuments, from individual buildings, to urban landscapes. Cracow, the historic area, the historic center, it's an urban landscape that we protect, from small scale to larger scale, from tangible things. For example, it is made from marble and it has ionic order, from intangible things, okay, like the myths and the traditions. Then we have the continuity of use we had, and now we have the management of change. The individualized policies, for example, each country or each had its own policy, and then we go to general strategies, like the charts and the regulations, DAX that I showed you before. And we have also from the European ones. And we are moving from historians and architects who decide what to preserve to politicians. A politician can decide what is worth to preserve. And from styled materials, we are moving to integrated preservation and higher quality of life. So let's go now to the design part of this presentation. In this framework, I have codified strategies of intervention in historically sensitive environments by presenting creative design approaches by very well-known architects. And I have gathered these strategies, I have codified, as you can see here. And all these strategies, I have I will present it in 6 categories. Okay, the first category is about collection. The new collects fragments of the old. The second is about colonization. The new colonizes the old, occupies, comes inside the old. Removal. The new selectively removes parts of the old. Empowerment, the new enhances and reactivates the old. Imitation, the new creatively imitates the old. And interaction, the new interacts and interprets the old. So let's start from the first category, which is the collection. The new comes and collects fragments of the old, spolia, and rearrange them by assigning and obtaining meaning. Are you aware of the word spolium, which comes from Latin? Okay, spolium was the skin of the animal stripped off, or the arms or armor stripped from the enemy. So if I won, then I'm taking from the enemy things. So these are called spolia. But in architecture, we're using spolia is the plural of spolium. We use it a lot when buildings have been structures or features or parts of buildings have been removed from an older, demolished or obsolete architectural work. If you come to Greece and you go to the islands, that I hope you will see a lot of churches, Christian churches, that they have used columns of the old temples, ancient temples. So this is called spolium. And why are we doing that? Because we want to, for material economy via recycling, for assigning value to the new construction via the magnificence of the old, because this kind of procedure started from great Constantine in Byzantium. He was the first one who actually very systematically did this spolium removal because he was from a very modest background, that he wanted to locate himself, situate himself as a continuation of the Roman emperors. So he needed this kind of prestigious things to bring in Istanbul, Constantinople, and create buildings. Preserving the old that is perishing and passing on meaning from the old to the new. And we are mostly interested as architects for the last part of it. This is what I was talking about, that the use of spolia, you can see here, you can see the arch of Constantine in Rome, that actually he used the ancient parts and just to justify his importance, while there was no other reason like recycling or things like that. And again, a modern example, a contemporary example from Greece, that you can see here the paths that they are leading to Acropolis and the Parthenon. The most important architect, Greek architect Pikionis, used this kind of spolia from neoclassical buildings to insert on the path or create the buildings. And you can see here, for example, this element that is a spolium from a neoclassical building. Or another example from Italy, Francesco Venezia, the Museo di Ghibellina. Ghibellina was a city that was demolished by an earthquake. So what Francesco Venezia did is that preserved the north facade of the Palazzo San Lorenzo and actually make this wall of the museum that commemorates the homonymous city which was destroyed. Another example of work by Francesco Venezia in Salemi, these are all in Sicily, that used the columns. This is an open theater. He uses this column, this is the stage, this is where the audience is sitting, and he used this column from a monastery that again, it was destroyed by an earthquake. And actually, it reminds that it's sinking inside of a volcano material, lava. Another approach is bricolage, another strategy. The new construction is achieved by using whatever come to hand by the old. Are you aware of the word bricolage? Bricoleur? Lévi-Strauss. Okay, so it has to do with I want to build something and I look around and whatever is available, I'm using it, reusing it to create something new. For example, if you remember the Picasso, the bull head who he made with a bike wheel and a seat. So this is, for me, the perfect example of bricolage. Let's see now another example of bricolage. And here is the Pritzker winner, Wang Shu, who actually, what he did in Ningbo Museum, took parts of the villages that were destroyed due to the development of the new city and create this kind of facade. Actually, what he did, you can see here that there are tiles that they are dated 1,500 years ago. So they are very old pieces of walls and everything. And what he did here is he actually used a traditional method called wapa, that the villagers used that when a typhoon was hitting their settlements to rebuild in a very fast, efficient way against the structures. So he had to teach again this method that the locals had forgotten. And with this kind of method, he created this facade that you can see here, the tiles, or the singles of the buildings, the broken tiles, the ceramics that they are dating, they are very old. Another part now we are going to Greece, to another architect, Antonas, who actually used the recycled grids of the Athens metro or the rain drains and created this kind of roof on top of the buildings for shading. So bricolage has to do with, as you can see, with a creative and very genius way of using things that they are going to be wasted. And again, you can see here the before, how the roof scape was, how the roofs were, and how they are turned with his intervention. So, another strategy is colonization. The new colonizes the old by feeding it with a new program. And such an example is the Architectural Museum in Frankfurt by Ungers. What he did here, do you know this museum of architecture? Okay. The strategy is really amazing because what we can see here is a box in a box. It's like the babushkas or the matryoshkas, that the one doll is inside the other. So that's what Ungers did. Actually, this was a 1912 villa. And the Ungers gutted the old villa and retained only its outer shell. And then he inserted to the new core, which is the exhibition space, because of course the villa was not suitable for this kind of use that he wanted. Encapsulation. The old creates the pocket, poche, where the new is integrated and no longer easily distinguishable. Are you aware of poche as a term? This is called the Beaux-Arts, a kind of, it's an architectural term. It was a kind of technique that you could ink your drawings, the residual space. It's like our today's hatching. But poche, you can find it in other also uses, like the eggs. Have you boiled eggs poche? No. Or, for example, pochette, the handkerchief that the gentleman put inside the pocket. So this is something hidden. And this kind of strategy, we can find it in another example of museum on top of the Acropolis, who actually integrated, insert the new museum here. Here is the Parthenon, Acropolis, and what Papoulias did is he inserted inserts the new museum inside the sacred rock. But where exactly? Between the foundations, the archaic and the classical foundations, which is 7 by 14 meters high. Actually, instead of building something, he used this gap inside the rock between the two walls. And you can see how it's now filled, and he created his own museum. And you can see the picture of this kind of foundation walls. And the result is that the museum is roofed at the same level as the Parthenon ground, so thus turning the new archaeological museum into a continuation of the rock. Another one strategy is merging or blurring. The new mixes with the old in a hybrid whole that benefits both. An example of this is Fondazione Pranda in Milano by Kohlhaas, that sometimes it's difficult to distinguish which is new and which is old, but also the experience in the space is based on this kind of approach. Usually, you see here the exhibition space and how he's using the glass instead of actually turning the exhibits to look at the center of the hall of the museum space. He turned them the other way around. So you are feeling that you are inside this kind in-between space, and there is this blurring. Or he succeeds that with the reflective materials. That they are using this he's using these reflections to confuse, to blur, to merge the old with the new. Another strategy is that the new invades in the environment of the old. And a very characteristic one is by my professors, Herzog and Moron at Harvard, that they designed this tour triangle in Paris, a very controversial high-rising building. There was a lot of upheaval. The municipality board, they were fighting for a long time. Why? You can understand the obvious reason, the proximity or the visual connection with the Eiffel Tower that since 1978, this was the last building that high-rise building in Paris, in the center of Paris, the Montparnasse. After that, they decided that all the skyscrapers or the high-rising buildings will go to the funds. And then, why do you think they took such a decision? It's a political decision. Because of Brexit. It may sound weird, but since United Kingdom left the European Union, they decided that Paris, France, has to be the economic center of Europe, which is the most iconic building for economic growth and flourishing, the high-rises, okay, the skyscrapers. And now, of course, they won the battle. And Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, had decided to build another 20 or 25 buildings, high-rises outside La Défense. Removal, we're moving now to the third category. The new selectively removes part of the old. And a very interesting example is that of Eduardo Souto de Moura in Braga, which actually, this was a project of 1980s. There was a market, and there was no need anymore for this market. Sorry. So that was the interior of the market. Here the sellers would stand. They were using these kind of sinks. Here they had the vegetables, the table with the vegetables. The buyers would go around this space with the columns. And he did something really unusual for an architect. He destroyed his own building. Usually architects want to build. All of us want to build, of course. And we are very emotionally involved with our buildings. If someone says that I'm going to destroy your building, we will become crazy. But what he did is he destroyed the original design. He demolished it. He turned it into a court, into an atrium, interior courtyard, and then he built a new program outside it, which is a school for music. And you can see at the left how it was before, the market, and at the right how he, the architect, Souto de Moura, leaves ruins. Columns as ruins, and then he builds the school of music, and these are the parathesis of the old and the new, the interior, and how it became. Thinning out, the new thins out the environment, another strategy of the old, as to highlight it through new architecture. This, we call it in urban design diradamento. It comes from Giovannoni. This strategy is, imagine a gardener that goes to a garden he treats a garden, he decides that some parts of the plants have to be removed in order the new to grow. So it's the unnecessary or parasitic planting that he decides to remove, and so does the architect. And such an example is by Moses Safdie in Western Wall Plaza proposal, 1973. And this is his intervention. Here it was the urban fabric like it used to be. It was a neighborhood for Jews. And he decided to remove all these buildings, so to reveal the Wall of Tears, because this is a very important place to pray for the Jews, and there was no access. And you can see, of course, on top the Muslims' Dome of the Rock on Temple Mount. So there is a palimpsest of religious plus construction, palimpsest of this religious. And that was the image, how was the wall before, and what he proposed. Of course, it was not completed in this actually way of make these platforms. It's just an open plaza. But the idea is to remove the old neighborhood, so to reveal such an important monument, which is the foundation of the Solomon Temple. Therapy. The new heals the environment of the old. And this is a very interesting intervention in Tutela Culip in Catalonia, Spain. And here you can see the Club Med on top. Club Med, they were touristic developments in the 60s all over the Mediterranean. They were selecting the best natural spaces, and they were building this kind of development. And but as I said, because most of them, they are very important natural environments, now we remove them. And usually when I present these two images, people think that it's the opposite side, that the before is the lower image and the after is the upper image. But in a kind of environmental radicalism, everything was removed. You can see here how it was again before, with the bungalows for the tourists, and how it is now. Only the very necessary infrastructure remains, so the place can be accessible, this place of natural beauty that has inspired the rocks, the rock formation has inspired Gaudí. And this is the procedure of how the removal and the regeneration, the stages of this kind of intervention. First, of course, you have the exotic flora, the vegetation that it was removed, because usually in this kind of settlement of touristic villages, what they were planting at first hand was palm trees. Because it mostly reminds you of something more exotic. And all this fauna had to be removed. Then the building deconstruction, the demolition of the buildings, then the basement removal, the foundation, and then the rock cleaning, which was manually done. And you can see how it is today. That is, of course, you can visit it. It's a space that you can enjoy the environment, the views, and only very strategically inserted elements that orient you to specific views, like this one, this room that you can see this formation exist. Empowerment. We are moving now to the fourth category. The new sustains, strengthens, enhances, reactivates the old because it fails alone. And of course, the most important example that we know is the Bilbao effect, the Guggenheim in Bilbao. Nobody knew Bilbao before Frank Gehry designed this building. And then, after that, it became a tourist destination, especially for the architects. But then Bilbao became extremely important. So we can actually enter new architecture in an old environment to empower it, okay, to make it, to enhance it, to make it important. And Frank Gehry did that with a very iconic building. And here you can see the 19th century buildings, the contrast with the symbol of Guggenheim. But this was a very strong intervention. Another philosophy, another approach is this one by Koolhaas at his office, OMA, in Essen. This was an industrial complex. It was designed by Mies van der Rohe's students, the buildings that you see on this slide. And what actually OMA did was minimum. They inserted only this kind of staircase that actually reminds us of it's an escalator, and you can see here that the red light, imitates the aerial bridges for transferring coal. The coal which has this kind of red light glow, and then they reproduce, they simulate this kind of feeling. And another image of this, so they did not actually intervene on the facade, they did the minimal interventions in the interior, just the main ones to be functional. And I find interesting their comment that their particular OMA partners are particularly proud of the Zeche-Zollverein intervention because it fulfills their utopian ambition to do nothing. No stripping, no glamour, no ruin, simply nothing. So they did just this gesture that it's minimal. Another strategy that we will see now in a very famous museum by Moneo is the organization. The new organizes the old, thus ensuring its preservation. And this is the image before, during the construction of the Museum of Roman Art in Mérida, 1986, Rafael Moneo. So you can see underneath there was the leftovers of the Roman urban fabric. You can see here the buildings, and what Moneo did, used a standardized rhythmic parallel repetition as a tool to organize the old and the new. And this connects the ruins, this repetition, this grid, connects the ruins with the new structure. And you can see again on this plan the existing that has its own orientation, its own direction, and what Raphael Moneo inserts, the new, which actually this parallel parts of the grid. And you can see here the basement where the interface of the new and the old. And again, you can see on the top that how he leaves the light come inside the space. Upcycling. The new creatively recycles the old, upgrading it. You are all familiar with the term recycle, correct? Are you with upcycle? Somehow. We usually, when we do recycle something, we give another life cycle, something it's not usable anymore, like, for example, this kind of bottle, and then we use it to recycle it, we take the plastic, but it's never as good as the original one. After this process, the final product usually is of a lower quality than the original. With upcycling, we do upgrade something. The final product is of higher aesthetic, environmental, and functional value. And a very familiar example case is a High Line in New York. This is a case at the scale of the urban design. You all know Dealer's Cofidio. You all know what it was before. Okay, there was a railroad infrastructure, and then it was abandoned because everything went underground. This was a strategy at the end of the second half of, at the end of 20th century. We did not want infrastructure underground, of course, because it lowers the value of the properties, but also above ground is very important for pedestrians, for open spaces, etc. So instead of demolishing the infrastructure, what they did is they turned it into a linear park. And the interesting thing is that the decision was not so naive, because it would cost more to demolish everything and move it away. And people in the area had already started using the space, going there, taking their dog out for a walk, because this, as you can see, the vegetation was taking over. And the mayor decided to turn it into a linear park. This is the final product of this kind of upcycling. And why we're talking about example a lot, because the way of the architects use the memory. We have similar examples in Paris, Promenade in Paris, that it's again for an old aqueduct that is elevated, but how they're using the vegetation that was existed, the rails and the new materials, that is actually exemplifying this project. But we should not forget, in this kind of urban regeneration, we should not forget gentrification. You can see here on this image how the value of the surrounding areas have increased. That is extremely, the people that were staying there had, especially the tenants, the owners, of course, they are very happy because they sell it in, they sold in a higher price, but the tenants had to move away. Another kind of upcycling is the first house, Gary's own house with his wife in Santa Monica in California. He actually, that was a residence that it was very conventional, Dutch-style residence. And what he did, actually, Gehry used materials and fixed the final product in this kind of form. This is a case that we usually teach a lot in schools of architecture. And now we're moving to the fifth category, which is imitation. The new creatively imitates the old. Évora, city Évora, Álvaro Siza, this is the traditional settlement with the aqueduct, and then Álvaro Siza comes and they create a new area, Quinta da Malagueira, and imitates this kind of linear structure of the aqueduct for to have a path for the pedestrians. And now we are moving to another strategy, Gestalt. The new functions as Gestalt so as to provide the old its original form. Gestalt. Do you know this term? I will give you a very simple example. For example, if we see parts of a circle, just the some arches, then we can our mind can create the whole. Okay, so it can create, it can make reductions to its original form. So this is the complete form. And this what actually Foster did in Reichstag. You know that the dome was destroyed, and then he came and he made this kind of dome, completing the form, but with other materials, and also make it transparent so we can see inside the parliament, and the politicians, and they can see us. And another kind of Gestalt is what this time is an artist, not an architect, Tresoldi, Edoardo Tresoldi, that he made this installation by some wire frame for Basilica di Sepondo, Santa Maria in Puglia, Italy. Again, the church, the temple was in ruins, and instead of having just a representation in 3D representations on a board, he actually made the original form, but from another material. And you can see this also during the evening, how it creates this ghost of the original building. And now we are moving to the last category, which is the interaction. The new and the old coexist in a new, more complete entity. They are in a direct and continuous dialogue. In this strategy, what immediately came to my mind is Zaha Hadid Spittelau Viaducts housing project. This is a residential complex, and you can see that it's designed around and above this arched opening here of the World Heritage Monument by Otto Wagner. This is a viaduct, sorry. And Zaha Hadid actually comes, it creates this interaction with the viaduct. This was one of the very first projects that she was not using the computer to draw. They started making this kind of curved architecture. Another strategy is connection. The new architecture spatially or metaphorically connects the fragmented parts of the old. And we are again, I'm going to show you another very famous museum, gallery by Sterling. And you can see here the new gallery, and at the left, the old gallery, Stats Gallery. And what he does here, Sterling does here, is it connects this gap. A lot of times you can see inside the urban fabric voids, because not everything grows or develops simultaneously. So in the urban fabric we have these empty spaces, and what he did, he connected this building with the surroundings by creating here actually a continuation, a facade, an urban facade, that before it was a gap. And then he imitated somehow the old, but the U-shaped building was set back in order to not to let the old be still prominent. So we have the setback, and we can see the old as we are going along the street, as we walk or we are driving. And then he connects the old with the new, and he creates this kind of promenade, architectural promenade inside the building. You can see here, it's postmodern architecture, but besides, if you like postmodern or not, I want you to focus on this kind of gesture, of this kind of circulation. And again, you can see in the circular atrium, this architectural promenade going up to another level. And framing, another strategy, the new frames the old, creating a figure-ground relationship. Sometimes the old, like this building here, is threatened by the surroundings, because the urban development comes closer and closer. So we have to protect the old and let them breathe somehow. Because the proximity is not always well done. And this is a kind, this is on the, again, in Athens, in Acropolis, at the foot, hill foot of Acropolis. And what Tsinkwinklaw and Davlati did is that there was a competition, they were demanding a new museum, and what they did is they proposed this building. And this building is created by two walls, two interactive walls, which are these ones. This one, the thinner and the bolder. And the one wall is made of marble, transparent marble, and the other wall is made by very conventional material like brick and plaster. So you can understand that the one wall symbolizes the ancient ruins, because it has the proximity with the Acropolis, and the conventional construction, the conventional wall, represents the modern city and the apartment buildings. This interaction of the two lines, they create the space in between to exhibit the findings from the Acropolis. The project that I showed you before, it was not constructed, but another similar, although not so sophisticated example is what we see here in Merida. Merida is the city that we saw also the Rafael Moneos museum, that the framing strategy comes here to protect the temple of Diana, and hold back the proximity and the evolution, the development of the urban fabric. And you can see here how it was before, with the houses around this city block, and how this retained the development. And in these diagrams, you can see how the new comes inserted around the old. And again, look at this relationship of the old with the new, the analogies, the heights, plus the fact that only lets some parts of the existing urban fabric to be shown when you are inside the space, only the roofs. So you are aware that there is something around, a new recent development, the recent city, the contemporary city, but you create this space to exhibit, demonstrate the old. And the last strategy for these concepts is the new is distance from the old by interpreting it from afar. Such a strategy is David Chipperfield Naga Museum in Sudan. You can see here is the building, the museum. It's open here. I mean, there are, of course, the slabs, but there are no windows. The wind and the sun go inside. And here, the far is the archaeological excavation where the foundings come from. And what David Chipperfield did is actually he created the main axis of the museum, of this museum, is oriented towards the archaeological site. So it is distanced from the source of the exhibits, but also you are always aware of where these exhibits are coming from. And you can see here the model from the Venice Biennale again, how is the surrounding and how is David Chipperfield's museum with this stepping roofing. So, until now, the focus of theory and criticism in the field of conservation and restoration was mainly in technical, environmental, and physical aspects. But now we have to move to interventions that has to do also with concepts. As we said, the range and number of tangible and intangible objects to be protected increases, and the criteria of inclusion is somehow something to discuss. But in my point of view, it's not just enough to, it's inadequate to just see in your designs environmental aspects or formal aspects, meaning if the analogies of how the old works together with the new. It has to, you have also to think of concepts. That's why because these concepts are giving meaning to the new structures, and your structure will be also valuable or may be themselves listed in the future. So you have to create something that it's worth listed. And this happens not only by form, but also by meaning. Okay, this is a requirement, I think, for all the design projects that you are producing in this school. I have just gathered these strategies. These strategies came out by scanning the literature and find cases that maybe they're older cases, as you can see, from the 80s, 90s. They're not something very recent, but they are cases that they are in books of history. They are important shifts in how we perceive architecture. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you once again that you are coming with this weather and early in the morning to be here for this lecture. Do you have any questions? You may see that some strategies apply to more than one cases, okay? For example, Guangzhou Museum, you can find also other strategies. But I just focused on one, so it can be easily understood. Okay. Thank you. Thanks also the technicians.